There's a lie so well told that millions of men spend their entire lives believing it without ever questioning it. They say being a good person means pleasing others. They say being polite means never creating conflict. They say being mature means enduring everything in silence. But what if these very beliefs are destroying your freedom? What if what you call kindness is, in fact, a sophisticated form of emotional submission? Most people never realize they are being controlled. Because the chains are invisible. They appear in the form of the need to be accepted, in the anxiety of being approved, in the fear of disappointing someone, in the automatic impulse to say yes when everything inside you wanted to say no. And the more you seek approval, the more power you give to the people around you. After all, whoever controls what you most desire also controls your behavior. Machiavelli understood something brutal about true human nature. People are rarely manipulated by force. They are manipulated by their own emotional needs, and few needs are as dangerous as the need to be loved, accepted, and validated all the time. That's precisely why so many intelligent men end up living lives they didn't consciously choose. They work to impress. They relate to please. They sacrifice themselves to be recognized. And in the end, they feel an emptiness they can't explain. But today, that changes. In this video, you'll discover how the search for approval is created, why it transforms into a silent psychological addiction, and how to reclaim a type of power that almost no one possesses today: the ability to act without depending on anyone's validation. And when you fully understand this mechanism, you may never again see your relationships, your decisions, and even your own identity in the same way. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There's a silent rule at play in virtually every social setting, and most people never realize it exists. From a young age, many men learn that being agreeable is synonymous with being good, mature, and worthy of acceptance. The problem isn't with kindness itself, but with how it's used to shape behavior. Little by little, they discover that smiling when they don't want to, agreeing when they disagree, and accepting what bothers them generates immediate social rewards. And then an invisible training begins. With each demonstration of emotional obedience, they receive approval. With each demonstration of firmness, they receive resistance. The result is predictable. They come to believe that their function in the world is to avoid discomfort. Machiavelli observed human nature through a very different lens than most thinkers of his time. His politics, guided by reality, not ideals, showed that what seems like virtue is often just a sophisticated control mechanism. Many men call education what in practice is fear of displeasing. They call empathy what at its core is fear of rejection. And while they believe they are exercising freedom, they are merely following a script that someone wrote for them a long time ago. The most curious thing is that this process rarely happens out of conscious malice. No one gathers a child and says, let's train them to seek approval for the rest of their life. The conditioning is much more subtle. It happens in small moments, when the child questions something and is reprimanded, when they express a limit and are called difficult, when they show discontent and receive disapproving looks. Little by little, they learn that being accepted is safer than being authentic. And then one of the most powerful traps of adult life emerges. A person grows up believing that their virtuous appearance is their greatest quality, without realizing that it has often become a permanent mask. They begin to measure their decisions by the reactions of others. They begin to filter their opinions. They begin to negotiate their own identity in exchange for harmony. And as Machiavelli understood through decisions based on real human nature, any behavior repeated for years ends up becoming an invisible structure within the mind. The point is that every structure has an origin, and when someone decides to investigate where this desperate need to please comes from, they find a story much older than they imagined. The need to please rarely arises in adulthood. It only manifests itself more strongly there. Its roots are usually buried much deeper in the first years of life, when the mind is still trying to understand how the world works. A child doesn't think about self-esteem, identity, or emotional independence. They think about survival. And surviving at that moment means maintaining the love, attention, and approval of the figures who represent security. When they receive affection for obeying and rejection for contradicting, a silent association begins to be built. The brain learns that saying yes brings people closer, while saying no can create distance. It seems harmless at first. After all coexistence requires a certain degree of adaptation. The problem arises when this adaptation ceases to be a skill and becomes a condition for feeling worthy of love. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful structures of control are those that the individual believes they have chosen. And few structures are as effective as the need for approval. It doesn't need chains. It doesn't need threats. It doesn't need surveillance. The person themselves becomes their own jailer, and without realizing it, she begins to organize her entire life around the acceptance of others. Over the years, what began as a simple protective mechanism evolves into something much deeper. First, it becomes a habit. Then, it transforms into a belief. And finally, it takes the form of identity. The man stops thinking, "I need to please," and starts thinking, "This is who I am." This change seems small, but it completely alters the way he sees himself. Now, refusing requests generates guilt. Disagreeing seems aggressive. Defending boundaries seems selfish. He begins to carry an invisible code that determines his actions. In meetings, he avoids conflict even when he's right. In relationships, he tolerates behaviors that hurt him. At work, he accepts responsibilities he shouldn't assume, all to maintain the image of someone agreeable. The irony is that this constant search for acceptance almost never produces the expected result. The virtù and fortuna taught by Machiavelli show that strength and destiny favor those who know how to act according to reality, not according to their emotional needs. But someone trapped in the need for approval is not reacting to reality. They are reacting to fear, and all prolonged fear ends up leaving traces that begin to appear in behaviors so automatic that most people don't even realize they are emotionally ill. Most men believe they would immediately recognize if they were emotionally dependent on the approval of others. But that's precisely the problem. The most dangerous symptoms rarely appear dangerous. They disguise themselves as politeness, maturity, humility, and common sense. A man apologizes for taking up space. He apologizes for expressing an opinion. He apologizes for asking a question. He apologizes even when he has done absolutely nothing wrong. It's almost an involuntary reflex, like someone pressing a button without realizing it. And the more automatic this behavior becomes, the harder it is to see. Machiavelli understood something that remains true centuries later. When a person loses the habit of defending their own legitimate interests, they become vulnerable to the influence of those who do not share the same scruples. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands observing the facts as they are. And the facts show that people excessively concerned with being accepted often give up their needs long before anyone even asks for them. They voluntarily surrender ground. They give up space before the negotiation even begins. And then they wonder why they feel like they are disappearing within their own lives. The signs keep appearing in seemingly ordinary situations. The friend who is always late and never gets challenged. The partner who repeatedly oversteps boundaries without facing consequences. The co-worker who shifts responsibilities while the other accepts everything in silence. In each of these situations, an invisible message is being transmitted, not through words, but through behavior. When someone continually tolerates what disrespects them, they teach others about the price of access to their presence. And when that price is zero, the human tendency is to consume without moderation. This is precisely why Machiavelli spoke about the value of the appearance of virtue combined with strategic firmness. Kindness without limits rarely produces respect. Often it produces complacency. The man infected by the need to please comes to believe that maintaining peace is his permanent responsibility. So he swallows frustrations, he hides opinions, he suppresses legitimate desires, he avoids necessary conversations, and he does all this believing he is preserving harmony. What he doesn't realize is that each ignored need leaves a small deposit of resentment within him. At first it seems insignificant, but no accumulation remains small forever. And there's a reason why so many seemingly calm people end up exploding unexpectedly years later. There's an uncomfortable truth that few people dare to admit. Being liked is not the same as being respected. For years, many men have believed that the more agreeable they are, the more value they will receive from others. So they make themselves available all the time. They answer calls immediately. They accept inconvenient favors. They cancel their own commitments to accommodate the desires of others. They make constant concessions, believing they are building solid relationships. But human nature rarely works that way. Machiavelli observed that people don't just evaluate someone's kindness. They also evaluate their strength, their consistency, and their ability to set boundaries. When a man demonstrates that he is willing to give up everything to maintain the approval of others, he sends a silent message. His own interests have little value to himself. And if he doesn't value his time, his opinions, or his presence, why would others? Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands accepting a simple reality. Respect doesn't just come from sympathy, it comes from the perception of value. And value is always associated with that which has clear criteria, limits and standards. Think of something that can be obtained effortlessly, without cost and without restriction. Over time, it loses importance. The same principle appears in human relationships. When someone is always available, always agrees, and always gives in, their presence ceases to be perceived as valuable. Not because they are a bad person, but because they have become predictably accessible. Machiavelli understood that better to be feared than loved did not mean spreading fear or acting cruelly. It meant understanding that respect demands consequences. People respect what has structure. They respect what cannot be easily manipulated. They respect what does not change its position simply to please. A simple example can be seen in the workplace. The employee who accepts all extra demands usually receives even more demands. The one who sets clear limits is usually treated with greater consideration. The same happens in friendships, relationships, and even within the family. Kindness without boundaries creates a curious effect. Instead of generating permanent gratitude, it creates permanent expectation. And when expectation becomes the rule, what was once seen as generosity becomes an obligation. It is at this point that many men begin to realize something disturbing. The more they tried to please, the less valued they felt. And this realization opens the way to an even deeper trap, the psychological addiction that transforms approval into an emotional need. There's a reason why abandoning the need for approval seems so difficult for some people. It's not just a habit. In many cases, it's a genuine emotional addiction. The person who lives seeking acceptance experiences small moments of relief every time they receive validation. A compliment, a thank you, a smile of approval, a quickly answered message, an unexpected invitation. Each of these situations produces a pleasant feeling, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem arises when this feeling ceases to be a bonus and becomes a need. From that moment on, decisions are no longer guided by conscience, but by emotional reward. Machiavelli understood that those who depend excessively on external factors become vulnerable to manipulation. After all, whoever controls the reward ends up controlling the behavior. That's why so many people spend years shaping their opinions, desires, and choices to maintain the acceptance of others. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, shows that true freedom doesn't exist when one's self-esteem depends on the reaction of others. A man may appear independent on the outside, but if criticism shatters his peace or rejection redefines his self-worth, he remains emotionally shackled. The most dangerous thing about this process is that the bill always comes due. Every time someone says yes when they mean no, a small emotional debt is created. At first, it seems insignificant. After all, it was just a favor, just a concession, just an isolated situation. But months or years later, these small renunciations begin to accumulate. The man realizes he is living a life he didn't fully choose. He realizes he invested energy in people who wouldn't do the same for him. He realizes his appearance of virtue was built on a series of silent concessions, and then resentment arises. A resentment that is rarely directed at others. Most of the time it is directed at himself, because deep down he knows he participated in his own imprisonment. That's why so many emotional explosions seem to arise out of nowhere. They don't. They were slowly building up over years. Every forced silence, every ignored boundary, every repressed need added more pressure to the system. Machiavelli spoke of virtù and fortuna as the ability to act strategically in the face of circumstances. But no one can act strategically when they are dominated by the constant need to be accepted. Before regaining control over the external world, it is necessary to break this internal dependence, and this break often seems unpleasant to those observing from the outside, because what many call rudeness is sometimes just the birth of someone who has finally begun to set boundaries. One of the greatest social manipulations of modern times has been convincing people that any display of firmness is synonymous with rudeness. As soon as someone starts setting boundaries, immediate comments arise. They say he's changed. They say he's become cold. They say he's lost his humility. They say he's difficult to deal with. The curious thing is that these criticisms rarely appear when he continues to sacrifice his time, energy, and interests for others. They arise precisely when he stops doing so. Machiavelli understood something few people like to admit. Those who benefit from the absence of limits are usually the first to complain when limits appear. This is why politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires observing reactions, not speeches. When a man spends years available to everyone and suddenly starts saying no, he quickly discovers who valued his presence and who only valued his usefulness. And this discovery is usually uncomfortable. After all, many seemingly solid relationships were built on an invisible dynamic of unilateral concessions. When this dynamic disappears, some people distance themselves, not because it has become worse, but because it has ceased to be convenient. The truth is that genuine rudeness isn't about setting boundaries. True rudeness lies in disrespecting the boundaries of others. There's a huge difference between aggressiveness and firmness. The aggressive man tries to control people. The firm man controls only himself. He doesn't need to raise his voice. He doesn't need to argue. He doesn't need to convince anyone. He simply communicates his standards and acts accordingly. And something interesting happens when this occurs. Friction begins to generate respect, not because people like obstacles, but because human nature tends to value what has clear criteria. Machiavelli spoke about the calculated use of force precisely because he understood that power is not an emotional outburst. Power is the ability to create predictable consequences. A simple example can be seen in someone who decides not to respond to intrusive messages immediately, not to accept commitments that harm their goals, or not to tolerate recurring delays. Initially, some people may interpret this as coldness. But over time, they learn that there is a cost to accessing their attention, their energy, and their time. And that which has a cost tends to receive more respect than that which is given away for free. The point is that setting limits is only the first step, because after a man stops compulsively adapting to the world, an even greater challenge arises, rebuilding everything he lost while trying to please everyone. Most men imagine that transformation happens in a grand moment, an epic decision, a definitive conversation, an event that changes everything overnight, but reality is usually much less cinematic and much more powerful. True change begins when he realizes how much of his life has been built around the expectations of others. It's not a comfortable discovery. In fact, it can be deeply uncomfortable. He begins to look at his routine, his relationships, his commitments, and even his goals, and realizes that many of them were not born of his own will. They were inherited. They were absorbed. They were accepted without question. Machiavelli understood that every conquest of power requires first the recovery of lost territory. And in this case, the first territory to be recovered is time. The man who has spent years pleasing others has usually given away his most valuable hours without realizing it. He responded to demands that were not his. He solved problems he did not create. He carried responsibilities that belonged to other people. The first step in reconstruction consists of recovering this precious resource. Every no said at the right moment gives back a part of life that had been silently surrendered for years. But making up for lost time is only the beginning. Next comes something even more difficult, reclaiming his own voice. For so long he has learned to adapt his opinions to avoid conflict that when he finally tries to express what he thinks, he feels a strange discomfort. Like someone relearning to walk after being immobile for a long time. At first, the words seem heavy, the boundaries seem rigid, the decisions seem selfish. But this happens because he is going through a process of emotional recalibration. Little by little, he begins to recover his presence. And presence doesn't mean dominating environments or constantly drawing attention. It means occupying space without asking permission to exist. It means entering a room without the compulsive need to please everyone in it. It means acting with constant adaptability without abandoning his principles. Machiavelli called this virtù et fortuna, the ability to shape circumstances without being completely shaped by them. And then comes the last stage of this reconstruction, the recovery of standards, because a different life demands different criteria. The man begins to better select his companions, his conversations, his commitments, and his priorities. What was once tolerated ceases to be accepted. What once seemed normal begins to seem absurd. And when this change begins to take hold, something new emerges. Not just someone stronger, but someone who has finally stopped living by external rules and started creating their own laws. After going through all these stages, something profoundly changes within him. It's not a noisy change. It's not a transformation that needs to be announced to the world. In fact, the more solid it becomes, the less need there is to demonstrate it. The sovereign man doesn't live trying to prove his strength. He doesn't waste energy convincing others of his worth. He simply knows who he is. And this difference completely alters the way he walks through life. For years, his decisions were influenced by external reactions. Now, they are guided by internal principles. Before, criticism could make him doubt himself. Now he evaluates the criticism, extracts what is useful, and discards the rest. Before, he sought approval. Now, he seeks coherence. Machiavelli understood that true power never depends exclusively on the opinion of others. Whoever constantly depends on the validation of others surrenders a portion of their freedom to them. The sovereign man takes the opposite path. He builds such a solid internal structure that external winds cease to determine his direction. This is exactly what politics guided by reality, not by ideals, seeks to teach. Reality changes, circumstances change, people change, but well-defined principles create stability amidst the chaos. The result of this transformation is often misinterpreted by outside observers. Some will say he has become distant. Others will say he has become difficult to influence. Some will even believe he has lost his sensitivity. But the truth is very different. He has simply stopped negotiating what he considers essential. His presence begins to convey a silent message, not through aggression, not through intimidation, but through consistency. There is something extremely powerful in someone who cannot be easily manipulated by praise, guilt, social pressure, or fear of rejection. That is why Machiavelli spoke of better to be feared than loved, while also teaching to avoid being hated. The sovereign man understands this balance. He does not seek approval. He does not seek conflict. He does not seek submission. He seeks only to live according to his own laws. His strength lies not in dominating people, but in dominating himself. His appearance of virtue is not a mask created to impress others, but a natural reflection of his integrity. He becomes unpredictable to those who try to control him, non-negotiable in the face of unfair pressure, and unbreakable in the face of the emotional storms that once brought him down. And when someone reaches this state, something curious happens. His mere presence begins to impose structure on the environment, not because he demands respect, but because he has finally learned to respect himself. If there's one idea that needs to stay with you after this video, it's this: freedom doesn't begin when people start approving of you. Freedom begins when their approval stops determining your choices. That's the point that separates those who live reacting to the world from those who finally take control of their own lives. For years, you may have believed you were being kind when in reality, you were just afraid of disappointing someone. Perhaps you called patience what was a lack of boundaries. Perhaps you called humility what was a fear of rejection. And if that happened, there's no reason to feel guilty. What matters isn't where you've been. What matters is where you decide to go from now on. The question is, how many decisions in your life were truly your own? How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? How many opportunities have you missed for fear of judgment? How many times have you sacrificed your peace to keep others comfortable? And the most important question of all, what would change in your life if you stopped needing the approval of others to act? Machiavelli understood that strong men are not those who control crowds. They are those who control themselves, men who are not bought by praise, men who are not intimidated by criticism, men who understand that true strength is born when their decisions are guided by principles, not by applause. So, challenge yourself. Over the next few weeks, observe how many times you unconsciously seek approval. Notice how many times you alter your opinion to be accepted. Notice how many times you prioritize the desires of others over your own values. This simple observation can reveal more about your life than years of distraction and excuses. Now I want to hear from you. What part of this video most resonated with you? In what situation in your life Do you realize you are still seeking approval? Share your answer in the comments. Your experience can help others who are facing the exact same battle. And if you want to continue learning about Machiavelli, human nature, power, emotional discipline, and personal development without illusions, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because there are truths that most people spend their entire lives avoiding seeing. And the sooner you understand them, the less control the world will have over you.